Hello everyone, I'm Pani Coffee, and today I'm showing you some advanced techniques in regards to plastic models and scale models in general. So if you've been watching the previous episodes, by now you probably have built your own model. I wanted to also have an advanced kit, so as you can see, this big kit is not really what you can see ordinarily. It's a version of Katoki Hajime, which is one of the main designers of Sunrise. Basically, this is his version, so it will always differ from what you might see in any publication like anime or manga, and usually they are huge. I mean, you can see the size of this one, but that's great because with this kind of kit I can show you the more advanced techniques I'm talking about. Let's open it up. Yes, water slide decals. And this is the manual. You've got a ton of sprues to go through. Wow. Holy cow. Yeah, these are the funnels and things. Holy cow. Okay. I guess this is the base. PET material. No, ABS material as well. Yep, that's it. We got them all. Okay, so for the tools I'm gonna use for building primarily, of course we need the obligatory nippers. This is what we're gonna use to cut the gates. I primarily use the God Hand single edge nippers, but if I run into something a bit larger or something harder, then I go for some old nippers. And then of course the abrasives. I recently got some razor for me, so I'm gonna use them here. There's the balancers. If I need to cut anything, shave off anything, if I really need to cut something, then I have my mini saw, but I don't think I'll need it here, so I'm not adding it primarily here. And of course a scriber. I won't really do a lot of scribing. It's simply, you know, if it's already good, I won't overcrowd the design. Especially this is already Katoki. This is a Katoki Hajime design already, so panel lines and all, there's plenty already. So I'm probably just going to deepen accents. Okay, so here we have some clear parts to cut. I'm not going to use the single edge nippers for that. So the single edge nippers, they are sharp, but they're also very thin and very brittle when cutting very hard plastic. So for this kind, I just don't trust it. I know that's going to be harder and brittle. I'm using something else. One of my older nippers, or by Three Peaks. And this is something they use for RC cars. So I know it's going to be sturdy. Give a bit of allowance for the gate, just to make sure we can make it as clean as possible. If you simply cut directly from the sprue, you cut the gate, right? You're gonna have a stress mark over there, and it's very noticeable on clear parts. So I'm gonna show you an example. So if I just cut a bit of this, look at how that whitened. Let's say a 600. That's actually gonna make it worse because it whitens everything, so it causes some scratches on clear parts. So the only way to go around this, that works for me, is our glass files. So the one I'm using is Razor, it's a gun primer. You can also use other glass files, but the razor is the only one I could find that doesn't cause scratches. So you can see there's a tiny nub left over there, so I'm gonna remove just half of it. And with that little nub, I'm gonna clean it off with the glass file. So, and this thing is amazing because it just it's an abrasive that doesn't cause scratches, or at least not very noticeable. As you can see, the nub is already gone. In some cases, I still use the balancer gray if I feel there are some irregularities because of the glass file, but in this case it's okay, it's flat. So I simply go with the white balancer to polish it back. So there, no stress mark, no scratches. And for cleaning up glass files, it's really easy. Just take some tape and simply do this. That easy. I do this while I'm working, but after every session I still wash it on the tap. For all skill levels, I recommend to check each and every sprue that you have, because it's a very rare occurrence, but sometimes there is a missing sprue, and that could really be bad because you'd be in the middle of building and suddenly you miss like a very important part of the building and you can't make the arms or you can't make the head. Okay? And also another tip is personal preference. Again, me, I really like marking the parts that I've already cut so that I know that I've already detached them from the sprue and I'm not gonna go looking back, you know, for them. Again, you can have your own method. I've seen other hobbyists just cut up everything and put them in different containers and then look for them later on. For me, mark, put them in one container, mark, one container, then proceed to cleaning and then later paint. So another tip is when you have these kind of joints, you're never really gonna see this. It's gonna get covered. Yeah, parts like that, like joints this way, for example, these kind of joints, nobody's gonna see. Even you won't see that, so just leave it. Doesn't matter if there's a stress mark. Won't be seen, minimal clean. With regards to disassembly, if you need to disassemble parts that you've already assembled, it can get difficult because, for example, here, once you've placed these pegs in, it's a very tight fit. So when you start pulling off pieces, it could snap off those pegs or bend them. So to prevent that, either you sand off the pegs so that you reduce the diameter when they go in here, or me, what I like to do is simply to snap this off with some nippers to chop off the excess there. Don't use your God hand nippers for this technique. I do not recommend it. This is a really strong nipper, so it can take it, but you can use an old nipper for it. So just reduce it. So now you can assemble and disassemble without worrying. You can do it the reverse way. You can clip the actual slots of the pegs, so, and that will loosen up the connection. If you intend to disassemble to paint them later on, this will save you a lot of headache. Yeah, now you can see it's very loose, and that will be easier to take this off later on when I need to paint it. Only caveat to this method is you'll have to glue them later on if you really want it to be a stable connection. But you see the advantage if I need to disassemble right now, because I need access to the pilot over there to paint it. So now I just do this. This one's pretty loose already. I put some loose pegs here already, so see, I could easily access that pilot. Even this one would come off. So to give you an example, there we go. I have access to it. Okay, so here I'm separating parts for painting. I'm only disassembling what's necessary. For example, this one, the hatch door. Since I need this to move slightly, I'm not gonna paint that. And the gray here obviously is going to be obscured. Unnecessary to paint it. So I'm just leaving that there. Taking off what needs to be painted. This one, yeah, no way out of it. Gotta paint it. This one, for example, so this is obscured by the purple plates. So this can stay there, definitely. So if you have something like a soft prior like this, it's better than using any metal one. So at least this one, it doesn't damage it, or not as much. Okay, no harm done. I found it. All is well and good with the world. So these are the parts that don't need to be painted. And this one, they stay as is. So to differentiate the parts that will be painted and those that will be left unpainted, I bag the ones that I won't need to paint. This also avoids any confusion. Just put them in any kind of separation that you might have, and these are the parts that I'm going to paint and label them, because with a lot of parts you could forget. So unless it's a really small kit, it's just better to label them. So I'm simply doing this so I can put all of the bags together and I won't get confused which is which if they are similar. Okay, so with clear parts like this, you don't really need to be cautious about having stress marks left on the piece itself. Like for example, this part. This is the whole head, in fact. Where is it? So you're not really gonna see this. This part. So these are the eyes, in fact. And so even if you have a stress mark down here, which is where I cut the sprue, even here on the sides, it doesn't matter because nobody's really gonna see it. Just make it smooth, but it doesn't need to be spotless, because we don't care about marks there. The only thing that you will see is that small part there. And on top of that, we'll have to either put a sticker there. This one actually works well because it's holographic, so when light hits the model, hold on. So these stickers are actually great because they're already holographic or reflective, sorry. And when the light hits the model, focus. And when the light hits the model, well, you get a reflection as if the eyes are glowing. So if you don't have the module for an LED, I know that they sell an LED module. So something that you can buy from Bandai, or you can make your own. But for this one, I'm simply going to use the reflective stickers. Just putting batteries in it, it's just, I mean, it's a small LED unit, but it's just high maintenance. So, well, maybe cut that off. So, you know, your choice. I like everything most of the time a bit more on the low-tech side. If I can make any effect from a sticker, from painting itself, an effect, you know, without the use of electronics, I like that better. So it's just a preference. Now you also might run into some seam lines, as you can see here. That's during the casting process. So here's a tool called a seam line remover. Not really that sharp blade, but it's really flat. So it can run down on those lines and it could flatten it. And there, we got rid of that line on the tube. You know, this is a gap created by joining the two parts, and you can still see this line over here where they join. So you can completely remove that by using some putty. Actually, even super glue. If you use some even plastic glue or super glue, simply apply some over the line. I just like using putty surfacer because it's a lot more sturdier and thicker, so it's easier to sand. So we could put simply a bit over here. So this should go into the gap, and then later on, once it's completely dry, we'll sand it off. So here you can see on the left side is putty, and on the right side is just some plastic glue. So you have to sand them until that line disappears. Even if there's still a bit of that line, it's okay because we're going to cover that up with paint anyway. But what we want is to fill that tiny gap over there, so that when the primer or paint comes in, it's going to be completely flat. Okay, so now we close that gap. Once this is painted, you won't ever see that there was actually a gap there. And the original gap, it's like this. See the difference as we turn? Then it disappears over here. So somebody asked me to demonstrate painting small figures. And me, I'm really used to painting small figures and miniatures because that's really where I started. I started painting miniatures, so Warhammer and other miniature and board game figures. So in this case, there are two pilots. So one of them is the pilot in the cockpit, and the other one's the standing figure. So the way to go about this is not to overthink the detail, because this is, like for example, his facial features, the only thing you can really see is a tiny point as the nose, and it's just pointless to paint the eyes here. What I'm going to do is more of adding shadows to indicate the eyes. Okay, so shadows are the foundations of small figures like this. So in fact, it's easier than you think, because the fact that it's smaller, there are less details, and we cannot perceive those details anyway. The first thing I would do is to remove those seam lines. As you can see, there is a line going over here. I hope that shows through the camera. Yeah, there's a little bit of... You can take either your hobby knife or something like this. This is a seam line remover tool. So this from Citadel, but you can get it from... There are generic brands selling it. Don't shave off too much, just flatten that line. Just to make sure that this doesn't show when we start painting it. And we're good. It's much smoother now. And when you start painting, then you won't see that ugly line anymore. It's better to prime it in white if the majority of the clothes is light. In this case, since majority, you see the pilot, the majority of the colors of the pilot's white. So we really get that white pants, bright. And the blue, it's easy to lather on, so that's okay. Let's prime them both in white, the same color as the panels, the white panels of the Hy-Vee. Now there's some that dried up. And by the way, this is a solvent-based primer, so if you're gonna use it with a brush like me, always find something, you know, older brushes or decommissioned brushes. I have this old army painter brush from years back. As you can see, it's all frayed. Yeah, could just apply this directly actually. Yeah, normally you use this, in fact, this formula for an airbrush. You can also use it via brush. So you can see already we get a bit of the details back. And the darker gray goes into the recesses. And so what happens is the raised areas will be your basic highlight. We're going to leave the skin parts as much as possible white. Don't worry about the base for now, we can always repaint that later. You have to wait for each successive layer to completely dry. There's a bit of pooling there, so I'm removing the excess with just my thirsty brush. So as for scribing, I find that this kit by itself is already as detailed as can be. When you see the amount of detail here, it's very saturated already. And you break those two parts, so you have detail over here, the torso part and the feet, and in between that you have this kind of breaks up that detail. Sometimes you see some kit, there's just so many lines, it just looks like pieces of scrap metal put together. Always restrain from too much detail. It's like in painting, you know, there are some blurry lines, there are some detailed lines. So unless you are planning to kit bash, then perhaps you can add more detail on the less detailed parts that need it. But what I'm gonna do is simply show you ways to panel line. I mean to scribe your model to make those panel lines. So the basic tools you're gonna need for scribing is, well, a scribing tool. Either you have that, it's like a needle, like a pointed needle. If you're really skilled, you can also use your cutter. I'm not that skilled with the cutter, so I'm gonna use some detailed scribing materials. So this is God Hand Scriber, but you can get any. There are a lot of different brands. Yeah. So for scribing, essentially there are three ways that we can go about this. So the first is the straightforward one, which is simply freehand. So this is the one that would require the most experience and skill, because you have no guide at all, it's all in your head. So I would advise against that as a beginner, but if you gain some experience later on, you can just freehand everything. So the second method is using something like this hard tape. If you ever had a Dymo label maker, it's a similar kind of plastic adhesive that they use. For example, we're gonna draw that. So for example, that way, and then for the tape, okay, so that way, and I can cut up the excess, so I can use it on another side. Just go along that edge. So we end up with the same pattern, but the difference is our scriber now has a guide and you're less prone to slippage. So here there's something stopping it from going all the way through. Let's see the outcome. I'd recommend doing this before actually painting or top coating. You can always adjust the depth of the panel lines. So what's nice with this with the God Hand scriber, the curve, is that it has this tapered edge, which means the deeper you go, the larger the panel line becomes. So the third way, my preferred way of doing these panel lines, scribe panel lines, it's these patterns. They are amazing and they're great. You could do all sorts of different patterns just by putting it there, see? These are more common shapes. So very cool shapes. Yeah. Now it's secured. And see here, it's a really nice guide because you won't ever slip. It's always within that guide. take off the tape just on the top. And then just take a peek. How much did we do? That's pretty much all right. Isn't that great? So adding the panel lines adds more contrast, but you also don't want to oversaturate detail. We can easily hand paint this. As you can see, it's the concealed weapon, but they left it white for some reason. All these other parts, majority of them you won't see, so I'm not really going to paint all of it. These parts, for example, these are the ones that are going to show. That's important to paint this as steel color, this one with the dark gray color. So in this case I'm going to hand paint. Majority of the parts I'm going to varnish, simply top coat. For the clear parts, I'm leaving them clear unless I'm not sure if I have anything that I could coat them with, maybe some gloss. So when top coating, I build semi-assemblies. This saves time instead of having to put them in individual holders and then paint them and then having to rebuild after that. So these acrylic markers can go without a primer, but I'd still recommend a primer if possible. I can't spray this inside, so I'm gonna do this off camera. Okay, I'm back. I've had some deliveries coming in, and this has become a running joke here. So when I start recording, you can be sure all of the deliveries are going to pour in. So you really have to be gentle with the decals, as they could easily shred. Basically, that's how it looks like. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Hopefully they don't crumble or fall apart. Yeah, I just said it. If you need some leverage here and you slightly do this, well, you know. So these are have also been varnished. Again, leverage for pushing down. Yep. It's looking good so far. I love it. So this is actually very tall. Usually they go up to here, but this one's extra tall. Yeah, the top coat really added this, it killed off that shine. And now we can go on to panel lining, so we can increase the sharpness and contrast of certain parts. So for example here, these lines, we can accentuate that by adding a darker ink inside that part. So here you can see we have the part that has been washed with a mixture of these effects that I showed previously, and this is the result that you get. So versus something that you barely see the contrast here, and to restore that you have to apply some washes or panel lining. This is something that hasn't been washed. You see, it still looks like a plastic toy. There's no definition in the grooves, while here we restored the contrast. See?
Well, I hope this video helped you in some way, or at least inspired and motivated you in your plastic models journey. That's all for today. I'll see you guys next time.